Dang, it's Kayla, and welcome to Inner to Outer, a podcast where I take my inner thoughts, do research on them, and then share my findings to the outer world. So as you could probably tell by the intro, this isn't one of my typical video uploads. Instead, this is a audio recording of my podcast, Inner to Outer. And the whole reason behind this podcast was I wanted to start a podcast since they were a big part of my 2018 and 2019, as well as I had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to share with you guys, but I wanted to be a little bit more informed before I did. So the other day, I was reading the news, which was one of my New Year's resolutions, and I found an article that combined two of my loves. One is being education, and the other was the environment. So a little bit about me is that I am currently a sophomore in the School of Education at UNC, and I'm studying to become a teacher. And then I also try to live a low-waste or environmentally friendly lifestyle. So this article called Making Yellow School Buses a Little More Green really caught my eye. I found it in the New York Times, and it was written by Ellen Rosen. It was originally published on January 22nd, 2020, and it was updated on January 30th, 2020. So in this article, Rosen writes about the pros and cons about having electric school buses. A majority of the benefits are environmental based, such as less fuel and emissions in the air, and the main con is economic/financial based. But later in the article, Rosen writes that there is a company in Richmond, Virginia called Dominion Energy who provided 50 electric school buses for 16 different school districts in Virginia. I just think that this is an amazing first step into potentially changing the way our school system deals with transportation. So the other article that I found that also talked about this issue or this topic was in the Washington Post, and it was called Time to Switch to Electric School Buses to Save the Planet and Money, group says. And it was written by Frederick Kunkel and was published on May 4th, 2018. This article was talking about how environmentalists were advocating for the usage of electric school buses instead of traditional yellow school buses, but in order to pay for these changes, environmentalists want the U.S. to use the settlement money that they got from the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal, and that resulted in roughly $14.7 billion. And the rest of the article talks about the pros and cons of implementing this change of traditional school buses to electric school buses, as the previous article did. So now that I have done a little bit of research as well as shared some of my findings, I wanted to give you my opinion on what I think about all of this. And honestly, I agree with what Rosen and Kunkel are saying. I think that we should be switching from traditional school buses to electric school buses. And there are many reasons why I think this. So first of all, I remember being in elementary school and learning about ways to be more environmentally friendly in your life. This usually happened around Earth Day, and one of the tips they constantly gave us was to ride the bus instead of taking a car to school. And I started riding the bus around 5th grade, and I continued to ride the bus all the way to my graduation in senior year of high school. And I have two vivid memories from my bus riding experience. The first one was in my high school bus lot. We had roughly 50 buses, and all the engines were running at the same time, and they would typically run for 10 to 20 minutes around dismissal time for students to get on the buses. And sometimes a bus would be parked behind another bus, since it was about 20 slots and each slot could hold 2 buses. So sometimes I would have to walk around buses, and this put me in the direct line of the tailpipe, I think it's what's called, and I would inhale the smell of, or the bus emission air. I can close my eyes and I can smell the smell of the bus emissions. And if you've ever smelled it before, you will know it is not a pleasant smell. And I would be constantly breathing this in, as well as the other thousands of kids at my school. We would all be breathing in this polluted air. And if you think about this, right, there were 50 buses on that lot, all their engines running for 10 to 20 minutes, thousands of kids being exposed to this concentrated polluted air. Probably wasn't really healthy for us. Yet we endured this, and still today, I would say millions of kids are probably exposed to polluted bus emission air. And it just makes me really sad to know that we could have prevented this. Okay, anyways, I'm getting off tangent here. My second vivid memory about the bus is that I would be waiting for my bus. This typically happened junior and senior year. We would have to wait sometimes from anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour for a replacement bus to come because the buses are pretty old and they would break down a lot. And so sometimes our bus would break down before it would even get to us, or it might not even drive off of the lot that it's usually parked at. And so we would wait in, sometimes the rain or the late April, early May heat for a replacement bus to come. And it was not a really fun time because sometimes we would be the last group of kids on the bus lot, and the regular school parking lot where teachers and faculty usually park would be empty. And we would really be like almost the last people at the school to, still be there. And it was not a fun time. And I'd like to think that if we switched over to electric buses, since they're a little bit newer, they wouldn't break down as much. But yeah, so my next point that I want to talk about was the fact that there was this discussion that was already born or alive or going, whatever you want to call it, back in 1990s. I think that's what the Washington Post article said, is that people already were thinking about maybe switching to electric school buses, yet nothing ever came from that. And then we get this article in 2018, the Washington Post article, talking again about this idea of switching to electric school buses. And now again in 2020, talking about switching to electric school buses. And for people who are doing math, that's 4 decades or 40 years of talking about switching to electric buses, yet we still mainly have traditional yellow school buses that I believe run on diesel, and nothing has changed. And that's our problem, I think, in terms of honestly any big issue, whether it be hunger, employment, and in this case specifically education and environment, is all we do is really just talk. People can be given the statistics, they can be given facts, they can be given research, proof, anything. Yet, no one will ever really implement these ideas and these policies or anything. All anyone wants to do is just talk about the pros and the cons. But what we need to do is we need to get out there and really just put these ideas to the test. Or if they've already been tested, then implement these ideas into our everyday lives. Because nothing will ever get done if all we just do is talk. Okay. So my last point I wanted to talk about was this dance between schools and society. I'm a firm believer that society impacts schools. Way back in the day where children were supposed to be taught to become good Christians, or even women needed to be taught like home skills to be good wives and good mothers, to now the fact that changes in the environment and trying to become more environmentally friendly has even leaked into schools. And I say leak, even though that has a negative connotation, but I think it's a good idea. I remember one of the examples of environment impacting school was the whole let's use less paper thing. I remember it started sometime around high school, I think, where we had less paper resources. We didn't have as many worksheets, and some of our textbooks were even online, or we would submit things online instead of printing them out and handing them in on a hard copy. And I personally kind of like this, because I always thought that, when the school year ends, I'll just recycle all of this. And some people don't even recycle the paper. They just throw it in the trash can, which I think is kind of crazy. But it's, I don't know. I like how us wanting, or the society, I would say, wanting to become more environmentally friendly is impacting how we teach kids and how education is, I don't know, is formed, is changed. But yeah, like I said, even though all these ideas are great and everything, I think that we need to really implement these ideas for there to be a real change and a real impact. And so I wanted to leave you guys with a couple of questions. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions to think about, or if you want to discuss them, feel free to leave a comment down below, or even just to talk with a family member or a friend about this. So the first question for you is, do you think this is even possible? Do you think it's possible for us to switch from something we've been doing for such a long time to something new that could even benefit us? And specifically in this case do you think we could switch from, or do you think it's even possible for us to switch from traditional school buses to environmentally friendly electric buses? The second question is, would you? Do you think that we should? And if you think we should, would you be willing to pay higher taxes to potentially fund this? And the last question is, what are some other things or changes we can make in the school or education system that would positively benefit our environment? If you've made it to this point of the podcast, I would just like to say a huge thank you for listening to the very first episode of my new podcast, Inner to Outer. I hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next episode. Bye.